Hey guys, this is a pretty different view, isn't it? So if you've played any fighting game for any amount of time, you've probably come across a move that you thought was cheap or overpowered. So the thing is about Street Fighter V and other fighting games in general is that everything is designed to have a counter to it. So if something seems really cheap or is overpowered, most likely you just don't know how to deal with it. The cheap move is like a question on a test, and you just happen to not know the answer to it. And there are countless number of questions that could be thrown at you, and there's no way that you can memorize them all before jumping into ranked. Plus, that's not a very fun way to approach fighting games. You should just be playing the game and having fun instead of studying for an exam. So in this video, I'm going to be going over how to approach cheap moves, how to learn how to deal with them, and then turn them into free damage for yourself. Okay, so let's say you run into a cheap move on rank and you don't know how to deal with it. Guys, that's okay. You will get caught by every single gimmick at least once. Everyone does. So just do your best to deal with it in the moment and make a mental note to go into the training room with your opponent's character after the set. So when you get to the training room, you're going to want to set up a dummy to do 3 things. First is neutral jump, then second is the cheap move, and third block for a little bit. So the reason that we have the dummy do the neutral jump is like to set a timer for ourselves, like a timer for a camera for example. And the reason that we have the dummy block after a while is to make sure that we're punishing our opponent for doing that move instead of just getting a random hit on a dummy. And from here we have a test bed for trying any and all possible answers you can think of. And now it's time for the actual testing, and this is something you're gonna have to do by yourself. I know, I said I would be going over the answers to cheat moves in this video, but it's much better for me to teach you how to deal with cheat moves instead of just telling you about the counters that I know of. You know, the whole teach a man to fish kind of thing. Anyways, I have 6 tips to help you guys figure out these cheat moves. These tips aren't set in stone, and some moves have counters that kind of go directly against what these guidelines say, but this is a good starting point if you don't know what to look for. By the way, if you're liking this video so far, please consider subscribing to the channel so you don't miss any of my future uploads. Okay, for tip number 1, I have a pretty interesting rule of thumb I like to use. If you don't see pros using the move that you're having trouble with, there's probably a good reason for it. Just think about it for a second. If this move is so good, why aren't the pros using it in their matches against the best players in the world in their tournament matches? Obviously, they're aware of the option. It's not like they're dumb and don't know their character. So most likely, there's a big problem with it. Most likely, there's an easy way to shut down the move about 90% of the time. On the other hand, as a quick tip 1.5, if you see a pro use a move a lot, you can be sure that that move has a lot of value, is just a solid option, and there's just not a lot of ways to shut it down. Okay, tip number 2. Generally, the bigger the move is, the harder it will fall. Take Alex's EX head smash for example. This move is flashy. It can be done from full screen away, it's a grab, it's really fast, and just has great properties if it lands. However, this move loses really hard to neutral jump because you can get a jump and punish afterwards. On the flip side, again as a tip 2.5, if a move is simple or basic, don't expect much. Sometimes the counter is just blocking and the best thing you get is being +2, and that's fine. Okay, tip number 3. If the move is airborne, you can either look to anti-air it or air to air it. A good example of this is Vega's Flying Barcelona. While the move may seem scary at first, the best thing to do is just jump up and air to air it because Vega doesn't have any invincibility on any versions of the move, and it's pretty hard for him to cover the air to air option. Some characters can even get a combo off the air to air. Okay, tip number 4. If the move is projectile based, it's best to avoid the projectile. Akuma's regular air fireball is a good example of this. If you can avoid the fireball by just jumping over it or walking under it, you could probably get a pretty big punish. I have a whole video that goes over Akuma and how to deal with his cheap moves for all the other characters, so check that video out in the description. Tip number 5. For moves with long startup, you can either counter hit them out of it, or if it's an armored move, you can jump over them to get out of the way. So an example of an unarmored move is Cammy's V-Skill 1. On paper, the move seems pretty good. It goes through projectiles, it goes from half screen away, it can cross up, it's +2 on block. The problem with the move is that almost every single character can just counter hit combo her out of it. For an armored move, Abigail's V-Trigger 2 is a pretty good example. So if Abigail charges this move in neutral, it's best to just jump over him out of the way. The Abigail could release the move early to try to catch you jumping over it, but this is a pretty big risk, so it's still generally just best to try to jump over it. Okay, for tip number 6, Moves with really long ranges, you want to look to either whiff punish them, or if it lasts long enough, you want to jump in on it. So moves like Chun-Li's standing hard punch are great because they reach really far, they're quite fast, and they're safe on block at most ranges. The best thing you can do against this is to whiff punish it. Moves like Dalsum's standing hard kick are similar, except Dalsum's move reaches full screen and is really hard to whiff punish. For these moves, trying to get a jump in is a pretty good idea. So for both of these counters, the whiff punishing and the jumping in, they can be pretty risky and might not work out all the time. But punishing your opponent just once for mindlessly throwing their limbs at you will force them to reconsider what they do in neutral, which gives you a little bit more room to breathe. Obviously, this list of 6 2/2 of a tip aren't exhaustive and will never be exhaustive. No list of tips will ever be enough to cover all possible cheap moves out there. But hopefully this is a good starting point. If you can make this testing of cheap moves a habit, your win rate will skyrocket. Anyways, if you liked the video, make sure to do all the YouTube stuff like comment, subscribe, all that stuff. Follow me on my other socials that you can see on the screen or down below. See you next video.